All right, what's up, guys? This week we've got probably a shorter pod. I think if I look at my success rate of saying that, it's never true. But however, we were definitely scraping the bottom of the barrel for things to talk about this week. There are some paddles, though. I think that's going to be one of the main things. So this week we're going to be covering the new Filth line update, some early thoughts on the GX2 from Gearbox, Engage Pursuit Innovation, Diadem BluCore, and some comparisons with that. Then we're also going to talk about, are certain paddles better for specific levels of play? This is a question we got a while ago that I forgot to get to. And then some small stuff in the kitchen. But before we get into that, I got to kick some stuff off about the home court. So it should be done hopefully pretty soon. I've got the paint lined up. They are probably going to come paint in ideally 2 weeks. It depends on the Minnesota weather, because this last Friday, we were out in the backyard, which we'll get to in a minute, doing some work, and it was 76 degrees.
Sunny, 70. It was beautiful.
It was amazing. And then yesterday, Sunday, snowed like 2 inches.
It was nice in the morning. All was fine. I take a nap and I wake up and it's like I got transported into the Arctic. Yeah. It was just a winter. I hate it. It's terrible.
Crazy. Our weather is absolutely unreal.
I got beef with Minnesota, man. I cannot believe we live here.
It's crazy. So anyways, the main thing about the court, so if weather is good in 2 weeks, it'll get painted. The temps have to be consistently above 40 degrees, can't have rain, can't obviously have snow. So we'll see. But ideally in April, it'll get painted. That would be awesome. But there are things we have to do to my backyard to get it ready. So there's a good chunk of landscaping work that just needs to be done, because all the construction that was done in the backyard just kind of wrecked some of the grass and made a few areas of the yard uneven, the dirt. So water kind of pools up in certain areas that we don't really want it to pool up in. And we probably need to install a drain system, and we just need some work done. So I was like, I'll go get some quotes. Went and got one quote. This guy comes back. No, I'm not. It's a lot of work. What we originally wanted, it was a lot of work. I'll go kind of through this a little bit, and homeowners who have done some landscaping, you're probably going to go, yeah, of course that quote makes sense. So we needed some concrete removed for a patio area. And then he was like, I'll give you a quote on putting some pavers here. I knew we weren't going to do that yet, but I was like, put in the quote. We needed some gutters on the garage so water doesn't drip on the court. And then there's 2 areas of the yard where dirt needs to be graded. Because it was just uneven, and then install a drain system. And then he also gave me a quote for putting in a retaining wall. I knew we probably weren't going to do that. Anyways, I knew this was going to be expensive, but I was sitting here going like, I don't know, like $15,000 maybe. Like, it was a lot of money. Bro comes back and hits me with a $61,000 quote. And now look, I know it's a lot of work. I didn't know it was going to be that much money. And I think this guy is on the high end of landscaping quotes. So I'm going to ask a few other people. But pretty much right after that, I went, all right, we're just going to do it myself. Yep. So you and me this last Friday went to one side of the court and just regraded the yard ourselves, because I was like, dude, there's no way $61,000 I can pay that.
Not
for
worth
this.
It. Yeah. Welcome to home ownership and doing construction and manual labor.
Yeah.
Not
cheap. Dude, we were outside digging for a while. We were out there, well, you had to go a little earlier, but I was out there from 9 a.m. to about 7 p.m. digging. It was crazy.
We moved a lot of dirt. Yeah. I mean, we pummeled that ground.
Yeah.
So
I have some time lapses.
I haven't done construction in a long time. I used to do roofing and siding and windows. Dude, my body was hurting. I've gotten soft.
Yeah. No, I was feeling it too. So yeah, after I heard that quote, I said, well, we're going to do it all ourselves. I might even try the drain myself. The French drain does not seem super complicated to do after watching some videos. It's like, I don't know. Anyways, that's the update on the court. Hopefully by May, it's in full commission here.
Yeah.
So
we're getting close.
Yeah.
We're getting close.
Very close. All right, let's talk about some paddles. So first, we're going to start with some new Filth paddles. Again, we've talked about this before, but I love that companies are doing this. So the Filth basically got a graphic update. So
rework.
They did this. It's still, if you can't really tell on our camera, it still has like the trippy lines that the Filth is known for, but they just kind of changed the pattern. I actually like how this one looks.
I do too.
It makes me think of like summer.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just
splash.
It just looks good. So I like how this looks. And then they have 3 shapes now. So they have the original elongated. They've got their hybrid, same invader shape. And then they've also got the Fat Boy shape for the Filth. So if you like the Filth, but you just wanted it in a wide body or a hybrid, now got it as an option.
Yeah.
So
I really like the rework design. I think it looks nice. I don't know why you'd mess with perfection and make these other shapes, but it's I get it. There's other people that that want something else. No, I actually do really like that now there's multiple options because now it fits everybody. And I still really like this paddle. And even hitting these two this morning, they feel very good.
Yeah.
I like them a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's, in terms of paddles, it's not going to be anything mind-blowing. It's just if you liked the Filth and wanted it in different shapes, now you've got it. And I like that they made it easy. So if you guys are watching or if you're listening too, so they just like how they did these colors and labeled them hybrid, standard, and then you've got the colors to differentiate at a glance. That's nice.
Very clear cut, easy to tell. It's simple.
Super easy. You can't mess it up.
Yeah.
So I love that, and we'll talk about why that's important soon.
Yeah, we're going to get into that later, but I like it when companies keep it as simple as possible.
Yes. And then the next paddle, I'm just going to go over some brief thoughts. I should have a review when this comes out, but the Gearbox GX2, so I've been play testing them, and the very first play session, like real play session I had with the GX2, I played the Integra XL. I didn't dislike the paddle, but it was one of those paddles where I was going, I would really like to go back to my True Foam right now. Wasn't vibing with it. And the biggest thing, and I think people who, if they do buy this, the biggest thing you're going to have to get used to is it has to be the most muted paddle in pickleball. If it's not the most muted, it's in the top 3 without question.
I genuinely cannot think of anything else more muted than this paddle.
I like muted paddles, but this one, it almost might be too much because it's really hard to tell how I struck the ball. So like on a dink, I would hit it, and like on other paddles, I immediately know what type of shot I hit the second I touch the ball. Mm-hmm. On this one, I'm like, did I actually hit that gently, or did I just like sail that for a pop-up? Obviously, within about half a second, I see what happened, but sometimes it's a little too late. So that was really tricky.
Now, trust me, I'm in the same boat, and it is it's way too muted. It is the most muted paddle I've ever played with. I cannot tell where the ball's going when I hit it. I've never had a paddle that I've wanted to put down more than this paddle. I tried the Integra. I tried this is just the elongated.
Elongated, yeah.
I tried the elongated. Obviously, I haven't really hit the hyper that much. Every once in a while when we're testing different paddles, I've hit the hyper. But I tried multiple weight setups. I think I did 3 different weight setups on the elongated. There was nothing I could do to this paddle to get me to actually enjoy playing with it. I couldn't finish a game. Like, it was terrible. I just don't like that feel. I cannot tell where the ball's going. It doesn't really hit that hard. Spin does not feel very good. I couldn't keep the ball in the court with it. So I just zero control of direction with this paddle. And I have no clue. Did I hit the ball? Did I not hit the ball? It just, I don't know. Not my style of paddle. So if you have elbow problems and you want something, they're not super light. Right?
I think the elongated ours at least is 119. The Integra XL was 116, and then the Hyper I think was 109.
I was gonna say the Hyper was pretty light, but the other ones aren't super light. But if you just want something with zero feedback and no vibration, these are great, but not for me.
I think they are going to be probably Gearbox's most polarizing paddle. The more I've played with them, the more I think I would probably choose it of any of the current Gearbox paddles, and that's assuming with the Pro Power being gone and taken out of the equation.
Yep.
And last night when I went and played League with it, I was having a much better time. I think I just got used to the feedback and the feel. I played with the Hyper first, played pretty well. I was enjoying it. And then I went back to the Integra XL because I went, okay, maybe the Hyper is really good and I just don't really like the Integra. But after going back to the Integra, I wasn't really having much of an issue anymore. So, and weight definitely helps. I've got weight on both the Hyper and the Integra XL. The Integra is just at the throat. The Hyper, it's at the throat and the head. But the thing I will say right now is the Integra hits a good bit harder. Even the people I was playing commented, since I started with the Hyper, when I went to the Integra XL, people went, oh yeah, you're definitely hitting harder with the Integra. I mean, they didn't even really know what it was. They just said, whatever paddle you're using now, you're hitting it harder.
Hitting harder.
And I could feel it too. I mean, serves, drives, everything was a good bit harder. So I don't know if the new SST core acts a little bit differently with different shapes, if there's like a slight break-in period. I know with this one that's not really supposed to be a thing. It may change and feel a little bit, but my understanding is that performance, power-wise, is not supposed to change like the old ones. So
nice. I will say, I am very glad to see an edge guard. If it wasn't so muted, I think like if everything else stayed the same, I think I would like it more. Like keep the edge guard. Give her to the gradient, but keep the edge guard.
Well, I don't have it on me, but one thing I will say, since it's clearly a spray painted edge guard to do the gradient, but the black area you would think was just a black edge guard, and then they added the other gradient. It doesn't. It seems like underneath must have been white because I've scraped both my Hyper and Integra, and there's white. Like you can see white, and I know I didn't hit a white paddle because last night I know I scraped the ground, and I immediately saw the white and went, oh. And I didn't hit a line either.
Yeah.
So
no, there's a few paddles that do that. I mean, the worst ones, and personally, I think it starts to look really bad. The 3S's. Oh man, I've seen some people with some not necessarily beat up, but just old 3S's that really scrape the ground, and it just looks terrible.
Sure.
With the white showing through when you scrape the ground. So
yeah,
I don't know. I personally just we could do away with these colored gradient edge guards.
Mr. Man over here doesn't like any color in his life, apparently.
Keep it nice and simple.
But yeah, so I will say the GX2s, if you're gonna buy one, definitely give it some time. It's gonna be a paddle that you got to warm up to a little bit. I'm gonna keep hitting it, see if anything changes how I feel, but I'm warming up to it more, and I starting to like it. So yeah, keep that in mind. But gonna be a polarizing paddle. All right, next up, we've got the new Engage Pursuit Innovations, which come out April 10th, I believe. So there's two of these. There's a 15.2 millimeter and a 12.7 millimeter. And first thing I'm going to say is, thank the Lord, Engage, that you have dropped the 6.0 non-6.0 naming scheme, because that got so confusing to tell people. They're like, which one should I buy? And then you're sitting there going, oh, the non-6.0 one or the 6.0 one. Like saying non-6.0
makes no sense.
Exactly. And if you just said, oh, like Pursuit Pro EX, then people would go, well, the 6.0 or the not 6.0. It was just a mess.
Too many variations. Now it's like, buy the 12.7 millimeter.
Yep.
Oh, doesn't get any more clear than that. Like,
exactly.
Thank you.
Totally. So these are interesting. I'm going to read some specs first, and then we'll go over some stuff. So first, these are going to be $280. Seems to be the standard price point for, premium paddles these days. Definitely on the high end. Mm-hmm. The shape is new. So it's a 16.6 inch length with a long 6-inch handle. And when you look at it in person, the face definitely looks long. Yeah. It looks kind of like a Project Flamingo or Selkirk Invictus shape with how long the face is, but then the handle is also very long. Mm-hmm. The swing weight on the swing weight on both of ours were 125. The twist weight on the 15.2 millimeter was 6.23, and then on the 12.7 it was 5.89. So probably about what you'd expect there. But yeah, 125, definitely on the heavy end. And I'm going to pull up an email in a minute. I'm going to let you dive into your thoughts about these and then how you stack them up against the Pro 1 and then the Pursuit Pro. I just want to dig through a few things and make sure I've got this right.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. The swing weights are high, but when playing with them, I wouldn't have really said that they felt like they were very high, which I find interesting. They do hit pretty hard. My biggest thing is like, man, if you are already coming from a Pursuit Pro 1 or a Pursuit Pro, unless you are like me where you just really, really like this shape more, I just cannot justify the price and performance change. I wouldn't even call it an upgrade. Change from the Pro 1 or Pro to this. It's just not a big enough jump or change for it to be worth it, in my opinion. And even if you're not coming from one of those paddles, $280 for this is that's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
They play nice, I think. And what I will say is they play less Gen 1 like than the others. So they have a less hollow feel. You can definitely still tell it's a Gen 1, but it feels less hollow, a little bit more solid. And the other thing I'd say is the sweet spot is in not the same spot as most elongated paddles. It is still shifted a little bit higher, but I'd say on these, for elongated paddles, it is a little bit more towards the true center of the paddle. So that was a bit of adjustment for me. There's really just, I don't know, I can't really tell that much to it besides the shape change. Like they hit power-wise pretty similarly. The feel, in my opinion, is maybe a little bit better, and that could just be because I like the shape more. But I think you get more options with the Pro and Pro 1 based on weight setups and stuff, because these are just, unless you like head-heavy paddles, high swing weight paddles like me, then I would just stick with the Pro and Pro 1.
Yeah, Engage is a really interesting one. So this is the first time we talked about our thoughts while we were hitting. We didn't really share any thoughts about what we were thinking while we hit them. And Engage has kind of always been interesting because they had the original Pursuits, which were pretty popular. Then the Pursuit Ultras flopped pretty hard. Then they had the Pursuit Pros, which were killer. Then they had the Pursuit Pro 1, which to me I personally felt like the Pursuit Pro was better. I think it wasn't that the Pro 1 was bad, but it was a lateral upgrade at best. It felt a little more flimsy to me. It was nicer that it was a lower swing weight because the other Pursuit Pros were a little bit heavier. So to me, it was lateral upgrade for that one. And then the Pro 1 to this is also just another lateral upgrade.
It's just been shape changes.
Yeah, it's largely been shape changes. And I know they did say, their marketing material, anytime I get it, it's just so much marketing fluff. Mm-hmm. I wish they were a little bit more straightforward on some of these things. Like they talk about this, they repositioned the flex zone, pro flex weighting to add additional spin, power flex core. Like they love the word flex.
Stuff means nothing to us.
Faster acceleration, whipping effect, advanced torque acceleration. Like it's just like, okay, like how about you just tell me what you changed, which they did in another email. But at best I'd call this a lateral upgrade. I personally still think that the original Pursuit Pros are Engage's best paddles. I think they feel the most solid to me. I would almost argue they hit harder or as hard as this. I didn't have the Pursuit Pro MX60 to compare. I only had the non-60 to compare, and I much preferred that over the innovation that we hit today.
The only thing I'd say is the handles have just improved because the old ones are so chunky.
I think they changed that across the board, though.
Oh, did they fix that?
We just only have the old ones.
Got it. Okay.
I think they've thinned the handles up.
I was thinking about this I agree that it's just been a lot of lateral changes. It's not really any big performance upgrades. Think about it like the iPhone lineup. You go from squared off to curved edges, back to squared off. It's like, all right, so the next one is going to be another round shape. It's just been shape changes, in my opinion. Like if I was blindfolded, just hitting the ball feel-wise, it would be difficult to really know. I mean, with these ones, I can kind of tell, but it's just not a big enough performance upgrade where it's like, yeah, that's worth it to get a new paddle.
I completely agree. And I also agree about the sweet spot because I feel like I was hitting a little bit higher, and every time I just went, man, that felt really dead. Like I did not like how that felt. It felt very cheap. It felt very flimsy. And I felt like I had to hit a little bit lower, and it started to feel a little bit better. Still not the best feel to me compared to the Pursuit Pro, but it was better going lower. So I definitely agreed with that.
Yeah. I'd hit like a full swing overhead and hit the normal zone, I guess you'd say, with an elongated paddle where I'm used to. And I'm like, man, the ball just didn't really go anywhere, especially for something like these that should hit pretty hard. Yep. And then I kind of treated it more like a wide body or standard paddle, zone. And then that's when I found the power and I was able to hit it. So it was definitely a bit of an adjustment, which for me is like, man, I just don't like that with elongated paddles because then I feel like I'm losing the point of having an elongated paddle outside of, the extra plow through and shape. Just like I feel like now if I have to hit lower on the paddle, I'm sacrificing the length that I should have. So
Sure.
I don't get it. I don't know. It's just not for me.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that these are for nobody. I'm sure there are people who would appreciate it, but I think going an extra $20, unless that extra length from a 16.6 inch and you really want the long handle, I would stick with the Pursuit Pro 1. But personally, like I said, I still think the original Pursuit Pros are their best paddle.
Yeah.
I think those are pretty killer. These just felt a little too flimsy for me. So, and it's interesting. I think it's a lot of the U.S. companies that only make paddles in the U.S., it's a very similar story. For example, if you look at Paddle Tech, very slow to innovate anything, and basically their innovation was adding raw carbon fiber to their already existing paddles with maybe a couple small tweaks and the shapes. And if you notice with Engage, it's very similar because thermoforming, from my understanding, is very hard to do at scale in the U.S. It's too expensive. It's a lot cheaper to do over in China. So if you are going to continue making U.S.-made paddles, I think it's just hard to find different ways to build them.
Yeah.
Like I know Spartus is working on I believe it's full USA foam core paddle, so that could be interesting. But I mean, look at Paddle Tech and Engage. Their paddles have kind of been pretty similar to each other, probably because they're using a lot of similar materials with a few tweaks here and there. And then you don't see them making any big changes like a lot of the companies overseas with thermoforming different foam in different spots like that. So yeah, I don't know. I'd say if you're a big fan of Engage, give it a shot, see what you think, but I'm not super high on these, especially for the price, because now you're in the price of a Pro 4, a Carbon True Foam. I mean, you're against the best of the best.
Everything on the market.
Yeah.
You've entered a realm of like, you're now competing with everything.
Yeah.
And so at 280, gosh, like I said, that's just a hard pill to swallow for this. I just personally couldn't spend that much on this paddle.
Yeah, I couldn't recommend it for 280. All right, next up. So these are pretty interesting. Got the Diadem BluCores in. So Diadem's kind of been quiet for a long time. So when I got into pickleball, my first year, that's when the Warrior came out. And at the time, I felt like that was a very different paddle for what existed on the market. There was no other triple core paddle. I believe they even had a way to thin down the handle when everything was pretty chunky at the time for Gen 1s. The only issue at the time was the Warrior would delaminate a lot, which I'm sure eventually got fixed.
In the actual true sense of the word.
Yeah, not core crushing, literal delamination, base layers separating. So paddle was good for its time. And then since then, I feel like Diadem has basically just been late to the ball on things that other people have already done. So thermoforming, they were pretty late to that. They had their Gen 1 with the 18K face was pretty expensive for what it was relative to the market. Same thing with their thermoformed version. I think their Speed Pro, the brief hitting I have done with that like a bit ago, I think that is their best paddle before these. That is probably the one. If I had to recommend a Diadem paddle, I would have said that. But overall, they just haven't done anything in a long time. Like other people are either outclassing them on price or outclassing them in performance. And they're kind of just middle of the pack, kind of expensive for what they are. However, I think that changes a little bit with these. So the BluCores aren't coming out for a little bit of time yet, but they'll be 280 when they come out. And then they've got a lot of different variations of them. So they're going to have 3 thickness options. They'll have a 14 millimeter, a 16 millimeter, and a 19 millimeter. The 19 millimeter version will be a triple core. So it'll be their BluCore, the foam, on the outside layers, and then I believe it's Nomex in the middle. So kind of like how the Warrior was. And then they have 3 shapes, and this is where we're going to get into our little gripe about shapes here.
Yep.
They are going to have, this is their naming scheme. Pro, Standard, Max. The Max.
Wait, before you get into that, everyone at home listening to this, or wherever you are, in your head, think about those 3 names and just imagine what those mean in your head. What shapes Standard, Max, and Pro would be. That's enough time for you to think about it. Now tell us.
Okay. So the Pro is, I'm going to read their dimensions and then we're going to talk about what we measured.
Yep.
So their Pro is advertised as 16.4 inches in length, 7.4 inches in width. It's kind of weird that they didn't max out the dimensions, though I might have an idea why they didn't do that. The handle length is 5.7 inches, so if you have a two-handed backhand, should have space. The static weight, 8.39 ounces on our 19 millimeter Pro BluCore.
The Pro is an elongated paddle, long handle, elongated.
Yes. We'll do Max first. Next. Max is the wide body. It's 15.7 inches in length and has a short 5-inch handle.
Yep.
And then the standard is a elongated paddle with a short 5.15 inch handle. So we don't have one of those. We only got 2 of the shapes right now. But my guess is that shape is going to be very close to a Project Flamingo, a Selkirk Invicta.
Carbon 3.
Carbon 3, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's the typical, or it's the same as like the Warrior Edge shape.
Yeah, that's, yeah, exactly. I mean, that would make the most sense since it's in the lineup.
Same, exactly, it'd be the same shape.
But we don't have that to verify.
So why would you call that the standard when the entire industry has started calling these standards?
And when he says these, he means
I'm playing for everyone listening.
Body.
The wide body, the Max.
Yeah.
Everyone considers their version of the Max to be a standard shape paddle. So why try to be different? It's just confusing. It makes no sense.
Exactly. It just makes it, when there's an established like naming scheme. Now look, there are certain times we're going against an industry trend and changing things. I think that can be acceptable. Mm-hmm. However, in this one where we have something that feels very standardized and very well understood, standard, wide body, hybrid, elongated, easy, done, cut, clean, dry. I just don't know the reason to do this. And what's even more confusing is when we measured our units, the Pro, and I presumably this carries over to the standard, but I don't know for sure, actually measured 16.3 inches in length, 7.4 inches wide. So it's even less maxing out the dimensions, and it's actually closer to a hybrid than it is an elongated paddle. And when I went upstairs and held it up to, a Carbon 1, a real elongated paddle, and you can definitely see a difference. I mean, it's basically on the Carbon, the whole edge guard was sticking up above this, and then this edge guard only went to the face length of the paddle. So there's definitely a difference there. And to me, when everyone is moving towards a standard and a wide body, one of those two, a hybrid, and then an elongated, basically what they have is 2 hybrid paddles and 1 wide body.
Yeah. And then mixed up the naming scheme.
Yeah. So I find that really weird, but like, okay, let's drop that. Like, people can learn the different naming scheme. I just don't think it really makes sense to do it different.
Mm-hmm. But honestly, I think my favorite naming scheme in paddles is Carbons 1, 2, and 3. It's just so simple. And if you're new to the sport, then it can be a little confused. Like, why is this 1? What does 1 mean? What does 2 mean? But if you've been around for at least like any amount of time, when someone says Carbon 1, they're talking about an elongated paddle. It's just so simple.
Or we could just do it like Bread and Butter did and literally just put standard, hybrid, elongated.
Well, that too. That's also very simple. So like either one of those is just so simple and easy to tell. Why Diadem?
Yeah, for sure. So, okay, let's talk about the Pro first. So I kind of already read it, but I'm going to read it again. So our static weight was about 8.4 ounces on the 19 millimeter Pro, twist weight of 6.03 and a swing weight of 117. So I guess technically, since that's about a hybrid, that is heavy in all regards, 8.4 ounce static weight and a 117 swing weight. However, playing with it, I really didn't think it was that bad.
No.
Like, yes, for a hybrid, it is on the high end, but I wouldn't have complained while playing with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then our Max version, 16 millimeter, had a static weight of 8.11 ounces, twist weight of 7.25, and a swing weight of 104, which is pretty awesome because that'll be pretty customizable. And then 2 last things. The face layup is Kevlar and carbon fiber on all of the models, 6 layers. I don't know the directions of all of those or the order that they go in. And then the edge guard is different.
I was just about to say, we should talk about the edge guard real quick.
So, okay, just so everyone knows, we do have some complaints up front. However, at least with the Max version, I definitely have some interesting things to say, and I actually quite like the paddle. So we'll get the complaints out of the way first. So they're doing, in the spec sheet that we got, basically they're doing this like molded edge guard, and when you feel it, it definitely feels a bit different than a regular edge guard.
Kind of like a rubbery material. And it's
like a hard rubber.
Yeah, it's like a hard, it's not like a, I guess
Not like a bouncy ball rubber.
No. It's like a floor mat kind of rubber, like a horse mat. So I don't know. It's interesting. It feels almost slightly oily. And when I tried to put lead tape on it, the little 3-gram strip pods would not stick to it at all. I could not get those to stay on it. Tungsten tape, Braden Pickleball Effects tungsten tape, will stick to it better. And I think you can get it to stay, but I would definitely be concerned that it would come off over a short amount of time.
I'd be curious in the heat how it hold up. So if you guys are watching the pod right now, we stuck one piece on here, but I just pulled that off extremely easy. And we did try on a regular edge guard just to see. Like, we used the same piece of tape and it was noticeably harder to pull off.
Yeah.
So,
and typically with this tungsten tape, the adhesive will kind of sometimes stay on the edge guard and the paddle. It does not want to stick to this edge guard material. It will not stay on there. I guarantee you it will fall off eventually just by playing with it.
Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully it eventually, will hold, but it's way, way, way less sticky than a regular edge guard. So that is a point of concern.
I will say, though, I will give them props for trying something different.
Yeah, totally.
I do like that it is something different, and I don't hate the material. I'm a little concerned that digging it into the ground will kind of chew it up and maybe take some chunks off of it eventually. That's not great, but props to him for trying something different.
Yeah, for sure. So that's the edge guard. Just a little bit worried about the weight sticking, but I'm going to talk about the Max shape first. So the Max 16 millimeter. I quite like this paddle. The shape is not my favorite. I would love to see more companies. I just think with the way the game is evolving with two-handed backhands, I think it makes more sense to have a longer handle, probably closer to about 5.6, 5.7 inches. But I played games in League last night with this, and I didn't hate it. And I do still think there is a market for shorter handles. There are, in fact, if you look at the broad market of pickleball players, which I kind of feel like that's who Diadem is targeting these days, they kind of got out of the pro scene. They, ever since Alshon left, I feel like they've just been a lot less interested in that. So to me, that is my perception of who their target demographic is. And this, I think, makes sense. I think if you're talking about your casual 3-0 to 4-0 pickleball player, most of them probably don't have two-handed backhands. So I think that makes sense. And this is incredibly quick in the hand. At 104, this thing feels very fast at the net. And I was very surprised how poppy or how hard this thing hit for how low of a swing weight it is. Mm-hmm. When you switched from the 19 millimeter to this, there was a very obvious speed difference.
Yeah.
Off the face.
It definitely does hit a lot harder.
Yeah. And that's the 16. Now I'm very curious about the 14.
Mm-hmm.
And the 14, well, unless they used a much denser foam, I would think probably has a lower swing weight. But I guess with foam, hard to say. But yeah, I really liked how this paddle felt. I think if you added a good chunk of weight to this, let's say you brought it up to about a Carbon 2 stock swing weight, I bet this thing slaps.
Yeah.
Power-wise,
I'm sure with weight, it could probably be somewhat comparable to the True Foam. So I'm curious for you, what would you rather play with? True Foam or this?
I've only got a couple games from League last night and then the session we did this morning to test everything. I would choose the True Foam because I'm used to it. I like how it feels off the face better and the handle length. However, I think this has a lot of potential and with weight could bring it into an area that would make me consider using that as well. I think long-term with the handle length, that would be the biggest turnoff for me. I use a TUI a lot, so I just think this would be tougher for me.
Exactly.
But I think it's got a lot of potential.
Yeah, you definitely liked it a lot more than I did. Personally, I just felt like it was a worse True Foam. I know it was hitting definitely harder than the Pro, the 19. I just felt like I couldn't shape the ball super well. They are honestly
very smooth.
The biggest thing that I find between these, and obviously the closest comparison is going to be the 008 or the True Foams. I just wasn't really able to shape the ball, which for me is so important. If I can't shape the ball with the paddle, I don't want to play with it. So that was my biggest struggle. Feel-wise was okay. Resets, everything played fine. I actually did like how it felt off the face. the 16 more than the 19. But yeah, my biggest thing was just shape. And then when it came to the 19, this, I don't know about you, this is definitely a very muted paddle, nowhere near the GX2s. I would compare this, its closest relative would definitely be a Lux.
I don't think I'd go that far, but I've also hit the new Lux recently, and like, it's probably been a while since you've hit a Lux. That thing is,
I mean, they're soft. Like, this is definitely feels a little bit stiffer, but in terms of just like power and how it feels to me, if you stiffened up a Lux, maybe if that throat hole was gone, it would feel like this.
Maybe. I mean, like it might, but it's in terms of actual power output, I would put it in all court at absolute best, like the absolute middle of all court, if not the lower end of all court.
Oh, I don't even know if I'd go that far.
Wait till you hit the new Lux. Then we'll see what your control sets.
What I would consider true middle of all court would be a Shogun, what I play with. It's definitely not leaning towards power. It's definitely not control. I think the Shogun is dead smack in the center of all court. This is much softer than the Shogun. I couldn't get the ball to move for nothing with this thing.
I'd have to hit them both. I don't think I'd go that far, but it's definitely not a power paddle for sure. And which is interesting because of that Nomex, you would think you'd get a little more spring from it, but this 16 millimeter max with a lower swing weight and just the BluCore definitely was more off the face. The 19 millimeter was fine, but I don't really know. Trying to think who I would recommend that for at 280. So if I was, let's go through all the other foam paddles. So you've got the 008s, you've got the True Foam, and then you've got the BluCores. I'm gonna rank all of the foam paddles in order that I would probably use them in. Mm-hmm. As it stands right now, I would probably go True Foam, Carbon 2. Then I would go, I think this Max, the 16 millimeter. Think after that, I would go 10 millimeter 008. Then I would probably go 13 millimeter 008. Probably this BluCore, the 19 millimeter, and then I think the 16 millimeter 008 would be last for me.
Really?
I'd have to compare them side by side a bit more, but I just like never really vibed with the 16 millimeter 008. And this one, I didn't really have any complaints. I just wasn't high on it.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of expensive for, I guess, what you're getting out of it.
I definitely agree. It's very expensive. For me, it's just like, it's not super poppy. It doesn't have great power from the baseline. If you just play a nice, soft, controlled game, then it's fine. But I just felt like I could not be very threatening with this paddle.
Yeah.
Like, speed ups from mid-court, speed ups, honestly, anywhere weren't that great. Like, I felt behind in hands battles when you had to pop your paddle, like the engages and stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I just felt like I couldn't really get anywhere ahead with this paddle. So I wasn't a huge fan of it. And at 280, you're competing with everything. Why wouldn't you buy a True Foam or a Pro 4 or anything else?
Yeah.
And
ultimately, it just depends what you want. If you want a control paddle, and I guess you have no budget, 280 is fine, but there's a lot of other control paddles I think you could buy. And, I guess if you want a control paddle that you are less concerned with durability, these could be an option. However, since this is the first like triple core thing we've seen with foam plus Nomex, we're going to have to wait and see how that holds up.
I don't think we've seen any triple core paddle hold up durability wise well. The Warriors were bad. Those Pro Drive, like that Pro Drive Ghost, whatever, that thing broke immediately. Is there any other triple core paddles I'm blanking out?
It might just be those.
I don't know. Just based on just those two, we have not seen a durable one. So this one, I'm skeptical.
Yeah.
The 16, I'm sure, is probably fine. But yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see. I'll have to play with it more.
For sure.
We'll find out.
So I really want to see the 14s. I think those probably have a lot of potential. I think the 16 millimeter Max has a lot of potential. I would be curious to see the standard and the pros as well. Mm-hmm. If they hit as hard as this thing does, definitely some good potential.
I like if I have to say something nice about it, I think aesthetically they look nice.
And I believe they'll even do different colors so you can differentiate them better. Like these, some of the text will be in different colors.
Oh, sure.
So at a glance, it's easier to tell.
Nah, keep it blacked out with the blue accent. I'm cool with. I think that looks nice. That is actually a good standout feature. And then everything else nice and blacked out. I think it's clean. It's got a good look.
Yeah. So last thing, just to wrap up, like a direct comparison with the Carbon 2, since I think that's the one people are probably most familiar with comparing it to the Max. So to me, the ball is probably a little bit more predictable off of the Max. I think across the face, it's a little bit just more uniform with the fiberglass patch and the Carbon. A lot of people have told me they have a really hard time with that because sometimes they sail the ball and sometimes it goes nowhere. In the entire time I've been maining this thing, I have not had that issue. Like to me, I feel like I know where the ball is going to go, but I do think the BluCore feels more predictable. The True Foam feels more bouncy and a little like springy, while the BluCore feels like a little bit stiffer or tighter. Those are probably the biggest differences. And right now with my weight setup, which isn't a fair comparison because the BluCore is not weighted up, I do think the True Foam hits harder. But I think with weight, that could change.
I definitely agree. I think the True Foam definitely hits harder and has more pop for sure. Now, what's interesting, and I think this is funny, I will say, I was struggling deep inside hitting both of these because on one hand, we've got the better shape with the elongated paddle. And obviously, I want to use this
I think
one.
you mean hybrid.
Yeah, let's just keep it. I know that's technically this and that, but we'll just, for the simplicity, we'll call it an elongated.
He likes hybrids, boys.
I really don't.
We've done it.
The Max felt better playing wise.
Yeah.
Hit it like the feel off of the face, but I hate the shape.
Sure.
So it's like, do I play with the thing I think feels better off the face or something that I prefer shape wise? And I think I'd still have to go with shape.
You're crazy. The Max was definitely better.
The Max did feel good. I will say the Max did feel good at the net. Like rolls were nice, overheads, baseline shots were fine. Yeah, it was solid.
Yeah. So keep an eye out for these guys. I definitely think there's going to be some potential. Like I said, I want to see the other units, see how they hold up. I think if I was going to probably rank it from just overall series of the paddles, for me right now, it would go Carbon, probably BluCore, and then the 008's last.
Do you think, I'm curious, now that we're seeing this big wave of full foam cores, and because it's new and companies trying to do it, all of them are obviously very expensive. They're top tier price. Do you think it kind of will get like tech realm where the tech in these paddles will trickle down and then eventually will be cheaper? Or like we saw that with thermoform paddles, where now there's like thermoform paddles that are $80.
I mean, even the Gen
$70.
3s.
Yeah. So exactly, that's even better. Do you think we'll see full foam cores eventually that are like $120?
Yeah, almost certainly. I mean, it's going to be at a premium right now while I think the scale for the factories gets figured out. And then once that gets figured out and then there's something new, it will trickle down.
Yeah.
There's no doubt.
I'm curious because, I mean, I don't know what the core in these looks like. Do they have a cutout or anything in these, or is it just solid? See, I'm very curious to see if there's going to be, like when smaller companies start doing it, is that what they're going to do, or is it just solid because I'm assuming it's just easier to manufacture and is cheaper, or they'll do more stuff to it like the Carbon and have these different cutout shapes?
Yeah, I don't know. Guess we're going to see.
Yeah.
Guess we're going to see.
Right. So overall, your opinion, like, good, bad?
Yeah, I'm a fan. Oh. I would like to see where these are going to go. I think they've got some real potential for sure.
All right.
If I know some companies have always been a little bit more conservative on grit, like Gearbox has always been, and there's definitely companies who push it way too far. I mean, like I said, there's probably a lot of paddles on that wall that aren't legal. These are like a little too conservative for me. I feel like they could go up a bit, and that would probably help people's opinion in terms of spin. Mm-hmm. So
I do think grit would help these paddles, but I've actually said this to a few people recently where everyone immediately feels a paddle and goes,
yeah,
it's not gritty. It's not very good. But grit is not the number one factor in spin. Grit helps, but it is not the sole reason why your paddle spins well or doesn't. The True Foam is a very smooth to the touch feel, but I'm telling you, I can shape a ball almost more with that than any other paddle.
Yeah.
So I don't know. These are definitely a little smoother, and I think grit would help, but there's more to it that plays than just grit.
Yeah, for sure. I think, though, the one thing I disagree with, and I still need to run my little test on this, I actually think that, I don't want to say it's purely number one, but if it's not number one, grit is so close to the top of being important, because I would imagine if you took a True Foam and you shaved its grit down to completely smooth, like there's nothing but smooth, I bet those RPMs drop to abysmal.
Oh, 100%. I totally agree. If you like shaved off all the peel ply and it was glossy, then yeah, it wouldn't spin it's as well as it does. But I would compare, now this is just going off of the hand meter, all right, guys? This is not scientific. Feel-wise, these feel the same as a True Foam Genesis.
I think a True Foam's got more.
I really don't. We'll test it later.
Yeah.
So I think they're pretty much the same, and the spin numbers, just again based on playing and looking at it, are not even close.
Yeah, for sure.
So based on that, I would not be able to play with these.
Sure. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll move on to the next thing, but yeah, I think there's some serious potential here for sure.
Yeah.
We'll see. Okay, so are certain paddles better for specific levels of play? And I actually think this is a really good thing to talk about, because historically, throughout pickleball, at least when we got into it, pretty much every paddle was like the same. Like there were some that felt better than others, but I wouldn't say there was a big discrepancy between, oh, this paddle is much easier to use and this is way harder to use. The first one I remember where I felt that way was the 002. Like you really needed to hit the sweet spot to maximize that thing. But now I think paddles are a lot more like that. And depending on your level, it may make a lot more sense to choose one paddle over another. It doesn't mean you can't play if you're a lower level. Doesn't mean you can't play with the quote unquote higher level paddle, but it might hurt your game more than it's helping you. Because it's just needlessly harder.
You also might just not have full access to performance that paddle can offer.
Completely agree. So I thought what we would do is, this is not an exhaustive list, but I kind of wanted to give people some ideas of paddles that might fall into these categories. And if you have any you think of while we're doing this, I kind of made this list myself. We can go over. So first, we're going to go over paddles that I think are harder to use and better maximized by higher levels. Higher levels a little harder to find. I would probably say 4 or 5 plus is what I'd say. And some paddles, like maybe even 5.0 plus, it is where you would get the absolute most benefit from it. But so first one, PaddleTech Bantam 12.7 millimeter. Great paddle, a lot of power, but if you miss that sweet spot, that ball is dead.
Yeah.
If you miss near the top, it's very dead. If you miss off the sides, it's very dead. But if you can consistently hit that center, has a lot to offer. Spin, power, all of it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that one.
For sure. What do we got next?
One thing I will say real quick before we move on, is I think it's not quite as black and white as just higher level player, lower level player. I think a big thing that plays into this with specific paddles is play style as well.
For sure.
Because you can have lower level players with certain styles that can use certain paddles better than others. So for example, a tennis player comes in. Even though maybe they're like a 3.5 or a 4.0, they have good ground strokes. They might suck at the net, but they can still rip ground strokes on the baseline just coming from tennis, and they're going to be able to use a PaddleTech 12.7, a Bantam 12.7. Are they going to be successful with it at the net? Probably not, but they're going to have, probably 4.0, 4.5 or better drives. So I think play style plays a big role.
Yeah, I think that's a good clarification that I hadn't thought about before adding this. That's definitely good. If you have, no racket sport background, that's going to be different than a guy coming in from tennis who's played for a long time.
Exactly. So you might be able to take advantage of certain style of paddles better than someone else who doesn't have a racket sport background, even though you're still a lower level player in the grand scheme of things. Yeah. So that plays a big role in all this. But next on the list would be the Engage Innovation. I think that is a good one, being a much longer, more head-heavy, higher swing weight paddle that is just going to be harder to use, especially if you're trying to learn how to roll or flick the ball. If you don't have that motion down, using a heavier paddle is just going to make it more difficult to learn that shot. So for people attempting to learn that or at lower levels, I do think that's going to make it more difficult.
Yeah, for sure. Starting with a 125 swing weight, you don't really know your wrist ability yet for some of these shots.
Exactly. So you might try to swing really hard because it's heavier and it might go flying, or it's just harder on your arm. You just don't have those certain muscles built up yet for those shots. It's just going to make it a lot more difficult. And I do think the sweet spot on those is a touch smaller.
For sure. Next up, I had the Gearbox Pro Ultimate 16 millimeter. Very similar reason as the last two. It's a tighter sweet spot. It's a heavy paddle at a 125 swing weight. And it's just also, as it breaks in and gets poppier and harder, like I think just controlling depth can be difficult.
Yes. I think what a common theme with a lot of these paddles on this list for that are going to be more difficult to use is the level of pop and power. One common thing with a lot of lower level players is control of their arm and their swing. A lot of big swings. Swinging big or swinging too hard, it's just going to be so much harder to keep the ball in the court. You might have one or two phenomenal drives a game, but then the rest of your shots, especially at the kitchen, not knowing how much to swing on dinks and stuff, you're going to pop the ball up more. It's just naturally going to be harder to control, where you just don't have as much control over your arm and your swing until you get to a higher level, and then you learn less is more.
And I think what you guys, looking at this list, one of the common themes you're going to see is that a lot of these, they are high pop and high power, but generally speaking, I think the thing that gets people in trouble most of the time is high pop and not necessarily high power. And if this is one of the first times you've kind of heard people differentiate those, people usually define power as what you can do on a full ground stroke or an overhead or a big swing, and then pop is either holding your paddle still for a reset, dinking where it's a very soft movement, or even a punch at the net for a counter.
Yep.
Pop is what I think gets people a lot of trouble, especially if you don't have a lot of control over your wrist. Like, I'm still someone who on a lot of shots, I use more wrist than I should rather than locking it. And so I find that if my wrist movement is just a little bit off, that extra pop on a really poppy paddle might send the ball a lot more than what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So pop is kind of what I think gets people in
You
trouble.
need a much smoother swing path and motion with higher pop paddles. And consistently, people who have not hit a higher level yet don't quite have the control or smoothness required for more poppy paddles, in my opinion.
For sure. All right, I'm going to breeze through the rest of these quick because other ones I had in this list, this one's getting delisted, but Pro Kenix Black Ace would have fallen into this category. Yola Pro 4, Selkirk Labs 007, Selkirk Power Air. The Power Air is a very interesting paddle. If you like it, there's nothing wrong with it, but I think in this day and age, it's a very small sweet spot. It is a little bit on the poppier side. By today's standards, it might be a little bit lower, but like the Power Air, I think in a lot of cases just does not make sense for most people. Yeah. And then I also had the Engage Pursuit Pro 1 in here. And
the two biggest factors I think that play into it is pop level and sweet spot size.
Yes.
So if you consistently are not able to hit the sweet spot, it's like golf clubs. If you are lower level, like me, use a cavity back. If you're a pro, you're using a blade. Smaller sweet spot, you have more control over the ball when you do hit the sweet spot, and just you need to be better and more consistent. Same thing with paddles. You need a bigger sweet spot, you're not as consistent, probably don't want to play with these paddles.
Yeah, for sure. And then I had this one, I have the carbon true foam on here, but only because of that smaller fiberglass patch that I've heard people kind of complain about. While that hasn't been my experience, it is, since that patch is smaller, it makes more sense that people may struggle with that or be like, oh, if you're not hitting center, you're going to get a different response from that fiberglass if you're hitting the top of the patch versus the center of patch. So
I've heard some complaints about that as well.
Yeah. So that one's kind of up for debate, but I would, I could see people argue one way or another where that could be harder to use.
And we're not saying like, if you're a 3.5 or a 4.0, you can't use these paddles.
No.
That's not at all the case. I think there are a lot of people at lower levels who do use and enjoy these paddles, but our warning is you might find certain aspects of the game much more difficult if you do buy and use these paddles, and there are better options that might help you get to the next level. And then once you get there and have more control over your game, you can find more success with these these more performance-oriented paddles.
Well, and here's another great example. So let's say you took a Paddletech Bantam and an 11.624 Power Series. If you cannot consistently hit the center, while the Paddletech has, I think, a higher ceiling for pop and power, if you can't consistently hit the center, you're never going to reach it. Whereas on the 11.624 Power, the sweet spot's so much better that you might actually be able to hit the ball harder because it's more forgiving out to the edges. So while the ceiling's not as high, you might take better advantage of it because if you're hitting the edges, it's still pretty okay.
Yeah. The sweet spot with the Power Series feathers out more towards the edge, where the Bantams is like a sharp line. You miss that spot, it's dead.
Totally. So in the more well-rounded list, I'll just breeze through all these and we can kind of talk about some of them if we feel there's some specific talking points. But the 11.624 Power Series, Honolulu J2K, Volair Mach 2 Forza, 11.624 Jelly Bean, Bread and Butter Filth, Vatic Pro Saga, and I mean, heck, I'm sure if we looked at, the Prism.
There's so many other paddles on this wall. Like the list for more well-rounded paddles that are just better for a majority of players is so much larger.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of popular, more power and performance-oriented paddles are typically going to be harder to use.
And, I think those types of paddles that are harder to use and poppier, more powerful, they tend to get a lot of attention or hype and people get excited about them. And so that's why I think a lot of people gravitate towards them. But there's what is theoretically really exciting, and then there's what's actually good for your game. And those two things do not always match up. Sometimes they do, but not always. I mean, there have definitely been paddles that I have a fun time using and really enjoy, but I know to play my absolute best pickleball, I cannot play that paddle.
Yeah.
Or it wouldn't be as smart for me.
Yep.
To do that.
I totally agree. There's the exciting, flashy paddles that a lot of people use and are great, but are just not going to play. I mean, perfect example is what I use. I play with a Shogun. It is a more all-court, well-rounded paddle. Not insane spin, not insane power or pop. I just play my best game with that paddle.
Yeah.
Not flashy, but it's just better.
And a great example for me is the Yola Pro 4. I like playing with the Perseus 14 millimeter. The Agassi could maybe even be better, but I haven't hit the 14 of that. Anyways, point aside, I think that I really enjoy playing with that. I think it's a super fun paddle. But when I played a tournament and I was just a little bit more tense, I was like, oh, I'm having a really hard time doing what I want while I'm under pressure. So while objectively I think that is an amazing paddle, I recognize for the pros, it's probably one of the best options they could play with and probably one of the best paddles on the market. Just because it has that objective trait, being that good does not mean it is the best for me.
Yeah. Yep. Totally agree.
So yeah, well-rounded paddles, I definitely think people should look into them more. I mean, the list we gave is not an exhaustive list, but definitely some places you can get started, and I think people can really enjoy. But think about your play style too. If you're someone like me, I'd say both of us are probably a little bit more of a well-rounded play style. I wouldn't call you probably can be more of a banger than me, but I'm kind of a whatever I need to be. I'm not a great banger, but I'm not someone who also wants to sit and dink all day.
Yeah.
So think about your play style and think what paddle would help boost the trait you have.
Yeah. Play style plays a big role into this. Are you someone who comes from tennis, has big ground strokes, probably going to lean towards a heavier elongated paddle, and then you'll learn how to play the soft game eventually, versus someone who's new to the sport or used to more wide paddles. It just changes based on play style. So that plays a massive role into this as well.
For sure. All right, we're moving on to the kitchen. Got just two small things. I had a question from last week that I wanted to answer in here. And then Aizec has some stuff he wanted to talk about his shoulder because people were asking about just some of his routine to keep his shoulder good. So the question was, what should I know about playing indoor versus outdoor for tournaments? I've never played outdoor pickleball. First, that's really impressive to have only played indoor pickleball, unless this is like your first week.
I'd love to know what state you're in, because here there's just, I know where Minnesota's different. We have an insane amount of public outdoor courts, but you must just live in an area with very few public courts, which I know there's a lot of those areas. So
yeah,
that is very impressive.
For sure. But as far as the differences go, I wish I could know what type of surface you're playing on, because if you're playing on a gym floor, that's going to completely change my answer. So we'll give two. I'm going to assume that you are playing on a hard court that you would play on outside. So the only difference is going to be, wind, temperature, sun.
Yep.
And those are pretty much your differences. You just have to accept that, one, you can't control the wind. The wind could be crazy and is going to blow your shots around. If there's no wind, consider yourself lucky. The sun can obviously get in your eyes. And then, of course, it's not climate controlled outside. So it could be hot or cold.
The biggest thing that matters to me, my thought process is playing indoors and outdoors for tournaments is if you get the option to choose serve, side, receive, defer, depending on the day, unless the conditions are very neutral, pick side. Matters so much. Which side you want to start on? Are you more confident on a certain side? If you think it's going to 3 games, which one is the better side to end on? Like wind plays a big role. Do you like playing into the wind, with the wind? Sun could be in your eyes if they're going to lob or just looking in certain direction. Plays a massive role. I think those are the 2 biggest factors, I think, playing indoors and outdoors is just lighting and wind.
Oh, also a big one. This probably isn't going to apply if you just have like one tournament on the weekend, but a thing to be aware of is, the ball when it's cold versus when it's hot is a completely different game.
Yeah.
You play in 40 degrees versus 70 degrees, that the ball will respond very differently. The ball in cold weather is very hard. It's very fast. It can be harder to control shots when it's hot. Points go forever because the ball is really soft.
Mm-hmm. And if you have a tournament outdoors in the morning, I've played an outdoor tournament where it starts early in the morning and things are pretty chilly and the ball is moving fast, and then you go on later in the day and it starts to slow down a lot. So just expect the ball to change a ton.
Yep. And just know that conditions are what they are. Can't do anything about it.
Yeah, 100%.
For sure. Okay, well, I guess it's your shoulder stuff.
Shoulder time. Yeah, so I have some shoulder problems going on with actually both of my shoulders, but particularly the left one is more severe. So I've been doing some physical therapy. I went to a place here in Minnesota called Odom Health and Wellness. Really great place. They have really smart people and an awesome facility. But did a bunch of physical therapy sessions, and they boiled it down to it is a small muscle in the back of my shoulder called the infraspinatus. It is basically, when I swing a paddle, especially the Tui, particularly because my left shoulder, it's that muscle's job. Now, this is just me regurgitating these words from someone much smarter than me, so I'm not pretending like I know exactly what I'm talking about. Its job is to slow the swing down. So with a really lightweight paddle, the paddle is not doing much to slow the swing down after I hit the ball. So it's all that muscle trying to stop my follow through. So there's a lot of strain on that muscle versus like a tennis racket is much heavier and it'll naturally slow down after the swing. So that's what's really causing the shoulder pain. And so right now, lifting my elbow out causes pain. Pushing doors causes a lot of pain. And so outward movement, essentially from my shoulders, picking things up like cans or coffee mugs and stuff. So I have a bunch of shoulder exercises and routines I do. There's some body weight ones, and there's ones where I use weight. There's ones with a exercise band. And so a lot of them are, again, outward movement. So one with an exercise band is I step on it with my right foot. The end of the band is an open loop band. I step on it with my foot, and it's a very weak band because it's a small muscle. And I grab it with my left arm and I extend my arm outward and then back down. And I just do 10 reps of that. And there's a bunch of exercises like that. I do rows with an exercise band, and it's all just targeting this small muscle to strengthen it. I'll lay on my side and I'll just lift my arm up towards my head when I'm laying on my side. And that will exercise and work out that muscle. Pushing against my palms and moving in a circle will actually exercise that muscle. And so just a bunch of different exercises like that. And I think this is actually can be pretty common with a lot of people, especially if you hit a lot of Tuis. So that's been my biggest thing. And it's been a very slow process. It still hurts. And I definitely need to get better at doing my exercises. I forget some days and I need to get better at that. But yeah, if you're curious or if you notice that you have a lot of shoulder pain too, look up exercises for the infraspinatus, and there's a lot of good stuff out there. And yeah, that's basically what's going on with my shoulder. It's brutal. I don't recommend it.
Yeah, take care of your body, people. I mean, that's what I learned is a lot of years of beating it up and not caring, and now I'm forced to care. And, I also want some longevity when I'm older and not have these issues, so it's good to take care of it now.
See, I've always been a big proponent of stretching. Like from every sport I've played, I did a lot of stretching and warm up and stuff. But man, everything I've done, I have destroyed my body. Like my knees, for example, got arthritis. I have patella tendonitis. I have a deviated kneecap. I have Osgood-Schlatter's. I mean, there's 4 conditions in just my knees. I mean, dude, it is brutal. I have the worst knees on earth. It's funny. I went to a physical therapist. I was out in California, and this guy, I want to say he did stuff for the Rams. He's worked on NFL teams, NBA teams. He did physical therapy stuff with elite athletes. And he looks at my knees. He goes, at the time I was 21, I think. He looks at me and goes, how old are you? I was like 21. He sighs and he goes, in the 25 years that I've been doing this, I have never seen someone with worse knees. I was like, are you serious? He's like, if you keep this up,
we got a light.
Well, there goes our overhead light. We had a big break in between in the middle of the pod. So, but he tells me, he's like, if you keep this up, you will be in a wheelchair at 40 years old. I was like, well, that's great. So yeah, I gotta fix my knees. I got some problems.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, not fun. Don't recommend it.
Yeah. Take care of the body, guys, especially if you're younger. You're going to pay for it now by doing the work, or you're going to pay for it when you're older and everything hurts. And I would choose to put in the work now so I don't hurt when I'm older.
I 100% agree.
One of the favorite quotes I appreciate, actually, it's you guys can't see it, but I can see it. We have this sign down here. Well, yeah, do something your future self will thank you for. So go outside and do something your future self will thank you for today.
Yeah, it's a good one.
But all right, that's the pod for this week. So thanks for listening, guys, and we'll catch you next week.
Peace.